Hey, welcome back, music lovers, to Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Cheryl.
And our special guest as we ring in the new year of 2023, Roy Cunningham, old friend of mine. We wanted to get in a real live musician to talk about the passing of the great Jeff Beck, one of the giants of electric guitar. Roy, a musician himself, down in Wimberley Valley, Texas. Got his own freeform radio show down there, servicing clients with his multi-dimensional production skills and rocking the house all over the South. Roy, you still getting out and playing a lot of music down there?
Hell yeah. I ain't going to stop till I die. And now the age works to my advantage. They expect B.B. King to walk in, and I'm going like, cover your ears, because here he comes. So and I just let loose, man. And your playing venues down here are exactly what you would think. Dirty, dark, dingy places filled with denizens like myself, sitting around, trading stories, getting into the next dimension, let's politely say, and waiting for a turn to get up there and make noise. And there's a lot of really good people down here. I think I am part of what's going to be the next wave to come out of Austin, and then I'll depart for who knows where. You know, I mean, it's like, it's odd how things work, but we're returning in full force. I mean, it's just different. You know, it's different.
Well, Roy and I worked together at New Northwest Broadcasters out on the coast here, where he was a account executive and did commercial production. Still doing a lot of commercial production down there and branching out in other avenues we'll talk about here in a minute. But Roy, you are despite your tenure up here in the Northwest, you were born and raised in the South. And let's get a little of your background. Now, you grew up in one of the music capitals of the known universe down there in New Orleans, Louisiana, right?
Well, yeah, it all started when I was 6 years old, and my Aunt Ann, I was her little Elvis. You know, it's like I didn't like Elvis all that much, and the reason why is down in New Orleans, you know, it's very black. It's a very black city in the French Quarter when you come to music. You know, who invented jazz? Who invented blues? It certainly wasn't Mr. White guy from Washington, D.C., and we related, and we all saw things as they were. And once you got to the outside world, racism. I left New Orleans to go to military school in 1965, and it was the worst nightmare you could ever think. Now, it was a really rude change, but the military, the United States Army out of Fort Benning, which is only 20 miles away, they saw a kid that they could mold into a killing machine, frankly. And I got a West Point appointment. I didn't want it because I didn't want to kill for a living. But the other part of what they gave me was the upstairs room in the central command quarters where nobody was, and a Marshall amplifier and a guitar. And I was studying the way Jimi Hendrix played. And I did not know that there were sound devices that could take a note and duplicate it, like down, 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 down. I didn't know that happened. I didn't know what reverb was. I didn't know what anything was. And all I knew was that I was hearing these solos, incredible sound. And I learned how to play with these fingers and these fingers. So I could play two solos at once. And that made up for the echo. And I just played and played and played for them. When I got to New Orleans, I had a Super Showman, which was 8 10-inch speakers and about 200 watts of RMS of power. And I put everything on 10, and I got down on my knees in front of that amplifier. I didn't know what was coming. I hit the volume, and it went like, wow, wow. I went, oh! And that changed everything for me. And it wasn't, when I got to Hollywood, then all of a sudden I found myself playing with people like David Bowie's guitar player, Earl Slick, or the bass player, one of my heroes, Glenn Cornish from Jethro Tull. And I mean, John Shearer from Genesis and everybody else. I mean, I was playing with some high-class people, and it was like a trip. It was like, whoa. Ever since 1993, I went back to work for Paramount, doing voice work. And then I discovered, somebody said, go to Portland. They're playing the kind of music you want to play up there. And they were, but it wasn't like Hollywood. It wasn't like California, where you just go and buzzsaw everybody to death. These were more traditional blues and jazz people, which didn't hurt my feelings none, but I still couldn't do it. I get down here, I mean, it was blanketed with good music. Sixth Street, the legendary Sixth Street. You hear
Right.
about so much.
Yep.
I mean, you couldn't go 10 feet without hearing somebody wail. And I mean, that went on for about 5 or 6 blocks. So it was magic. Then all of a sudden, one day, like almost overnight, it changed. The venues that were so popular, and these were not dirty, dingy places. These were on Sixth Street in Austin. They were nice places to be, had good sound systems and good quality entertainment. So we played there, and then it went away. And now it has gone down into, if you really want to get experimental, which I can't stand to play the same thing. I'm glad I never had a one big hit. And the reason why is because all those poor bastards are getting old now. And the guy goes, "Hey, Benny, y'all gonna play a famous hit of yours, right?" And these guys will tell you back there, "Geez, I'm gonna play it one more time," and then they do because they get a paycheck. They want you to do this, and that's why I've always kind of worked for myself, which is what Matt was alluding to. I've known Rusty Hicks for a number of years, and him and his wife have a magazine that they've worked on called Steam Magazine. It's a very well done publication. It's free. It's the musicians, it's the artists, it's the cooks, the chefs, and we've got them all down here, and I'm friends with all of them. So I decided, Rusty, let me throw in with you and let's get it going. So it was a really strange trip. All that to say, all that started out with Old Black Men in Preservation Hall in 1956. So one of them sat down with me because I was a cute little chubby white guy, and it was fun for them. And so they give me an assignment. They said, "I'll teach you how to play guitar. When you can come back in and tell me what you hear in one note on the guitar." That relates to my first year in quantum mechanics at UCLA, when they explained to us how they, look at galaxies or any light source in the sky and judge its distance from the Doppler effect. Well, on a guitar, if you're not looking for it, you'll never see it. Now, I wasn't looking for it when I saw it, but I was playing the guitar and the sun caught the string. And right as I hit the string, turquoise and light brown bands began to oscillate like, and I wasn't tripping. I was a kid, but that's exactly what it was like. And when the first impact came and the energy was the greatest, the intervals were, and as it slowed down, they go do 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 do, and the bands broadened. And if you're looking at this, which I'm always a curious animal, and I looked down and I hit it again, and the same thing happened every time I hit the string. And I began to notice that as it slowed down, other harmonics began to appear. And later on, like Guitar Shorty, who taught Jimi Hendrix things, the Guitar Shorty, those old guys were there, and they'd say, "That's right." They didn't know what the hell they were talking about. They had no idea of quantum physics. All they knew was that guitar made a certain sound when you hit it a certain way. And so I learned with this damn thing, and I got a pick, which became, the major way. And then I suffered until Jimi Hendrix came along, because nothing, I mean, we would get incensed when we heard Pat Boone do Tutti Frutti. And then along one day, the first ones were the Doors. Dun, 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 dun. That guitar sound drove me nuts until I went down to World Lines Music and asked them how that's done. And they gave me a fuzz box. That was the end of the whole story. I had a Silvertone Twin 12 and an old Fender ripoff from Japan or somewhere. And all you had to do was turn the damn amp on, hit the volume, and you didn't have to do nothing. You hit the damn switch. And all of a sudden it's going, making all kind of noise. And I went like, wow. And I learned how to control those noises. And that lesson that I had was reflected later on at UCLA, as I said, when they showed us the graph. And I raised my hand and said, "That's what guitar strings do." And it was such a stupid, innocent thing to say in front of this towering intellectual. And the guy just stopped and said, "That's the best way I've ever heard to describe this." And I went like, I don't even know these old men's name. I don't know the band that I played with. The band leader's name Blue. That's all I know. He could have been the most famous person in the world, but you didn't bother to ask. You knew their spirits. You didn't see a person. It was this thing that came on you when they talked to you and said, I'm going to show you what to do, boy. You got to pay attention. And I did. I sucked every bit of it, and I still do. I have so much. Every time I learn a new lick, it's like there's a whole month worth of study to do. And I'm going to die before I learn it all. So what? I'm going to raise hell.
Well, Roy, you mentioned 1965, the year you went off to military school. That was also the year that the Yardbirds started to get played on the radio in the United States. So, what do you remember about that?
I remember thinking that this person, this band must be from another planet because ain't no guitar should sound that way. That still makes I get excited thinking about that. In my mind, I would never ever be able to play guitar like that. I studied and learned, but there was so much more. Yeah, Jeff Beck kept doing different things, so you could never catch up with him.
And you mentioned another thing that I think ties into Jeff Beck, and the fact that he never had a big hit. Certainly as a solo artist, the Yardbirds had a string of radio hits, but as a solo act, he never had a big hit, and he never came close to the commercial impact that his peers like Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, and he's right up there amongst them, if not above them, in terms of his technical ability. But he had this independent spirit. He was just kind of following the sound in his head, didn't really care too much about all the other satellite things or trying to reach a commercial audience.
He had everything he wanted. At least one person a day liked what he did, and that was enough.
He splits off from the Yardbirds and forms his own group, the Jeff Beck Group. Now, he had a couple of singles before that. One he actually sang on and had a hit in England, which he pretty much disowned. But the Jeff Beck Group puts out those two albums with Rod Stewart on lead vocals, the Truth album in 68 and then Beckola in 69. Truth predates that first Zeppelin album by several months, about 6 months. I think it came out in summer of 68. Zeppelin's first album came out at the beginning of 1969. So the Beck Group really kind of patented that heavy sound. Now, Jimi Hendrix clearly had the power trio sound and Cream and all that before, but these guys kind of took it to a new level. But Beck always had, he was a quirkier player. I mean, he just kind of had this playfulness about him where he was constantly looking for new sounds and new ways of expression on the instrument. And correct me if I'm wrong here, a lot of his style wasn't based on a lot of outboard gear and electronic gimmickry. It's stuff he was doing with his hands.
And that's the whole thing right there. Jimmy did it with his hands also, but he also touched upon another dimension with add-ons. And Jeff Beck had add-ons. Jeff Beck had something that sounded like a Leslie, that when you come on with that real, what do you call it, fast modulation,
yeah.
he would come along. But what he taught me, anyway, and lots of other people, was that those things are cool, and you need to learn how to actually play them. Like, I run across it, and I don't say this from some perch at a different level. I'm down on the ground as far as learning compared to what they just know. But I was able to see people for their lack of dedication to their craft when they just come in and go, this thing sounds great. And then they just noodle because they have no idea where they're going. With Jeff Beck, you had to study, and I did, I can talk about it. You had to study what he did with these two things before you studied what a modulation device did or delays. He used delays to great advantage. He had a compression scheme that was off the chain, similar to Alan Holdsworth's. And I use it. I use it from time to time. You just touch the strings where you want the notes to play, and they just sing a different way. Well, that's what Jeff learned. And he had a technique where, and Gatemouth Brown was the same way, oddly. Gatemouth would, and you can't see these here. How about there it is. He would play like this. I'm doing it, maybe you can see it. These fingers were all active, and this one was using the volume control. And it's hard, believe me. I'm explaining it to you. I can't walk right to the guitar and do this. And these were used for picking, and this was used for picking. This hung loose until it was time to touch the vibrato bar. And then he would either dip it a tiny bit or he'd slap it and make it go vroom. And that sound that when he would slap it was similar to how a saxophone player makes the sax growl on certain notes. And he was able to call that for. I did that for the first time with a guy I was recording with up here 8 years ago, and I did it by accident. And I listened back, and I tried to picture what I had done for that to happen. And 8 years on, I have not been able to duplicate it.
So Jeff Beck, we're talking to Roy Cunningham, my old radio buddy. He had the first group with Rod Stewart. Stewart seeing bigger and bigger things in his future splits. And his second Jeff Beck group, early 70s, recorded 2 albums, Rough and Ready and the self-titled. I've never gotten into those. I just don't care for the vocalist he had at that time, Bobby Tench. He kind of stomped all over a lot of that stuff, I thought. I think he was going for more of I think in his mind, he was thinking a supercharged Motown sound with that group. I don't know that he was successful in really producing that. But then, mid-70s, he hits his commercial peak with an album that embraced a couple of hot sounds at that time, funk music and jazz fusion. And he gets a sympathetic producer in George Martin, the Beatles producer, and puts out the Blow by Blow album, which really, when we did 1975, Cheryl and I, that was up for consideration for my album of the year. I ended up going hard rock with Physical Graffiti and Toys in the Attic also came out that year. But that Blow by Blow album is superb, and he dispensed with the vocalist altogether. It was an all-instrumental album, and he nailed it. And a lot of influence from John McLaughlin. I think that's kind of what prompted him in that direction is John McLaughlin's work in the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
I don't have limited tastes. I support everybody. I learned that in Hollywood. And it doesn't matter if it's the music you ever heard, they're still your fellow workmates. And they're doing well, so respect them and keep your opinions to yourself. So I never did think much about all of it until that damn Blow by Blow album came out. And I mean to tell you, the sound of the guitar inspired me to sit for hours and explore it. Back then, that was 1976, 77, I guess, in Atlanta, and I was playing with some hot people there too. But to sit down, and I did discover the flanger, which is I read everything I could on him. He used things, but not in the traditional sense. And the flanger has always been troublesome for me because it affects every aspect. In other words, if I take a wave and do this, and I expect the effect to be here, but when the wave goes down here, I don't want much effect because now the effect washes out the waning guitar energy. I never realized, until much later what was going on there. So I was not happy with the flanger, but I did use it. Hello.
Roy, before we get off the Jeff Beck topic and move on to start building more onto our playlist, when you hear the name Jeff Beck, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Is it a particular song? Is it a particular sound? What's the first thing you think of?
I mean, what do you say for a guy? The first thing I think of is it may be hard for some people to understand, but in life, right now, above you and above you, all you got to do is reach up and grab it. Don't ask me what it is. It's naturally occurring because the earth makes noise. And the earth makes noise, and that's above us all the time, outside of our range to hear with these. But you can hear it with this. And that's what I think of when I think of Jeff. He was a spirit. I'm on that river, but I'm not Jeff Beck.
Roy, let's get to our playlist. Now, you're going to make the first contribution here. If you're going to come on our show, you got to pick a song from the year we're on. Roy, 1978, you're in L.A. at this point, correct?
Atlanta.
You're in Atlanta in 1978. So at this point in time, you're a rock guy. I think you're starting to get into the jazz fusion stuff, right? At this point in time,
I had been into that 2 years prior.
Okay,
but that's a story.
But here, we're at a time in popular music where new wave is starting to make an incursion. And '78, obviously, disco is just insidious. It's infecting everything in that year. But new wave actually has a commercial impact in the United States for the first time in '78 with the Cars debut album. I know that one hit your radar that year, but also the Police put out their first record in 1978. And one of the songs that struck you and that we're going to talk about here is their first hit, Roxanne.
It was a pure example of a style that I didn't know existed called ska. I don't tend to label things. So all I knew is that the guitar player was doing a great job of using that thing to create a colorful canvas upon which Mr. whatever his name is, Sting, sang beautifully. And of course, the drummer, what's his name, Stewart?
Stuart Copeland.
Yeah. Stuart Copeland.
And he was clear and precise. And the sound of the music was something that acted as a whole. And therefore, it appealed to me. So, yeah, the Police represented what I would call a fulfilling bit of material for a spot that I didn't know existed.
And what set them apart, and Cheryl, you can talk about this too, is they broke in as they were marketed as a new wave act. They had the haircuts and the look and that marketing, but all three of these guys were pretty heavy players. And Sting comes from a jazz fusion. Sting comes from a jazz fusion background. Stuart Copeland played in a prog rock band, Curved Air, and had already had some success there. And then Andy Summers, who was quite a bit older than the other two, he goes way back of the late period Animals, like the psychedelic era toward the end of the 60s. But very much, all three of these guys come from
he was in Soft Machine before that, too.
Yep, all three of these guys came out of a progressive background. So they're bringing this heavyweight musical ability into this new wave form. And the perception of punk and new wave at this time, certainly in the United States, was, well, these people can't play. I mean, these are people who just picked up the instruments 2 days ago, and they're banging around, and they don't know what they're doing. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of these new wave guys could play, and Police were about as musically accomplished as any of them.
Yes, sir. And, it's just good. Bottom line, it's just good music. It's good sounds that when sound takes me someplace that I am not currently, I'm all for it.
So I don't know about you, Cheryl. I think I first became aware of the Police with their third records, in Yada Madada, da-da-da-da-da-da, when that hit the radio. And then Roxanne, remember the movie 48 Hours, when Eddie Murphy, who was just rising star coming out of Saturday Night Live. He was a teenager when he started on SNL. And he was about the hottest thing going. His first movie, 48 Hours, and I believe it was his first scene in that movie where Nick Nolte goes to bail him out of the jail cell. And he's there sitting. He's there sitting there. Roxanne! I think that's the first time I'd ever heard it was Eddie Murphy in that movie. But then later on, being a fan of the Police, I got all their albums, and I just loved that first record. Loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I got to go back to the Police. I'd say Stuart Copeland is right near the top among my favorite drummers.
I love Stuart Copeland's sound. Like, he's got that. He's one of those drummers that uses cymbals and the hi-hat in a way that is really unique. That really plays a lot into his sound. He's definitely one of my favorite drummers. And like what you're saying about the Police, the fact that they were such great musicians and they all had something they were bringing in, it just sounds so good. Everything is so crisp and clear. Yeah. And that's part of like Stuart Copeland's drumming too. Just
some of the best drum sounds on their records. Certainly.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got into Zenyatta Modada first too. That was the first album that I really listened to a lot.
So that came out when we would have been about 10, 11 years old, around there.
And it wasn't at the time. I wasn't 10 or 11 when I was into it. I mean, this was later when I was in high school. And Regatta de Blanc, love that album. I didn't actually go back to the first album until after I had been into those albums for a while.
Yeah, I don't think I got the first album until they were basically done. I mean, now I got into them when Zenyatta Modada came out. Contemporarily, I would have been listening to that stuff and the hits on the radio, but I don't think I ever went back and got those first two records until after Synchronicity. But then Outlandos d'Amour, the first album, became my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I particularly like the second track. I'm always fascinated by track twos on records because often those are duds. The
Yeah.
second track is often a letdown because a lot of a lot of records you want to lead off with something that's just going to grab people by the neck, and then that
Mhm.
second track just it kind of drops off.
It's kind of the
So
sophomore
yeah,
it's the sophomore song.
right,
Yeah.
right, but so lonely. I just love
Oh,
that
yeah.
song.
That's one of their best songs.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. But
And
that
it has that reggae, I mean, that's the thing too, is that their sound, brings in a reggae feel to it.
right, and then the
And
title of their second record kind of joked about Regatta de Blanc
Regatta
is
de
basically
Blanc.
saying white reggae, and that
Mhm.
a lot of the negative reviews of the band, I think at the time, were kind of scoffing about a bunch of white guys playing reggae. Well, they
Yeah.
were they
Well,
were
I
they
did
were
a session with a guy named Nasser Phillips, who was Grover Washington's engineer, and he asked me to play some reggae. And I never will forget. I was sitting here, and he was sitting here at the board, and I started playing. And he said, "What do you think you're playing?" He was a Trinidad guy, and for him, smoking about 5 ounces of weed before you start was the right way. It was the baseline, and I'm trying to articulate English, and I'm going like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You play white boy. You play like white boy." I said, "So what, man?" And so he said, "I'm gonna show you how to play." And it was. Do you know? Have either one of y'all had an experience with piston pins and engines? Here's the deal. And the piston pin, you have to sit there and very delicately find the exact location, and it slides right in. It
Mhm.
won't go in until it has the perfect fit. And it's the same thing with this stuff. With Nasser trying to show me this, it was like he had me playing this much off of what I was playing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when I
You're
went
just
back
a
and
little
listened
behind the
to it,
beat or just
you're gonna
feeling.
yep, you're gonna say the same thing I was. It's
Yeah,
people obsess about technical ability, but the number one thing in being a great player is feel, and that
it's
doesn't have
feel.
necessarily anything to do with chops. It's just instinctive, and
Well, I
just
mean, and I
finding that
think
perfect. Yeah,
it's one of those things too when you're a musician, as soon as you get in your head, forget it. It's gone. Like when at least I feel that way as a drummer. If I'm playing in my head, as soon as you start like thinking about what you're doing or what everyone is doing and you let go of the feeling, like it just empty and it's wrong. It just doesn't feel
look,
right.
anybody that can play a rhythm with their feet, a rhythm with this hand, a rhythm with this hand, if you can sit there and do that, you're on my list of being a super being. I can't hardly figure out how to hold a pick and play the damn string.
Well,
I mean, it seems
it's
like
a full
nothing.
body experience, and that's what I'm saying is it is in your body. It's like if you let it go and you let it flow from your body and not just from your mind. And I think reggae really incorporates that. Like reggae, there's certain, like genres and types of music where it's not a a cerebral experience. It's a full on like body emotional experience, and that's what he's trying to convey there, I'm guessing, is just sort of like fitting it in. You have to feel where that beat goes. And also why I think reggae is one of those things where it's so ingrained in people's, like they grew up in that culture, they felt it, like it's in their bodies, it's in their
It's
souls,
natural.
it's in, yeah, it's
Yeah.
natural.
while we are on the topic of feelings, I'm going to transition into my first song pick for 1978. By the way, we're going to add a dozen songs to the playlist in the year 1978. Our first choice from our guest today, Roy Cunningham, Roxanne by the Police. I'm going to go with a song from Earth, Wind, and Fire. It was first released simultaneously with their first greatest hits record in 1978. It was a standalone, not a standalone single, but it was a new song that was only on the greatest hits album at that time. It is called September. And this song has had, I think it just continues to grow in stature over the years. And Cheryl, you and I kind of made a editorial decision when we're trying to choose songs for each year. We want songs, A, that would fit in a group setting, and B, songs that transcend generations. And we started with American Pie. That's still something that young people listen to and love today. And I think September just continues to impact younger and younger listeners. You still hear it all the time. It's used in commercials and movies and television shows. And it's one of those songs that just can't help but put a smile on your face when you hear it. And really, Earth, Wind, and Fire's whole catalog, it's uplifting music. It is positive music, angst-free, not to mention just great players. Earth, Wind, and Fire, formed by Maurice White, who was drummer with the Ramsey Lewis Trio. They were kind of a soul jazz unit that had a pop hit in the mid-'60s. He came in. He was their drummer. Their rhythm section, Ramsey Lewis's rhythm section, left him. And those two guys, the bass and drummer, went on to have a hit record called Soulful Strut, an instrumental in the late 60s as Young Hold Unlimited, which is also the music background of one of my favorite soul songs of the era called Am I the Same Girl by Barbara Acklin. It's the same music track with a vocal and lyric over it. Ramsey Lewis replaced, I can't remember which is which, Younger Hold on the drums. And then he formed his own group, Earth, Wind, and Fire. They were initially on Warner Brothers Records, a big band, about a 10-piece unit, bass, drums, guitars, horns, the whole bit. Didn't have any big hits in the early 70s. They jumped labels. Clive Davis of Columbia signed them up. And then they really broke out in 75 with Shining Star, which was the #1 record that year.
And I love that song.
Oh, yeah. Great funk song. And then they were huge for the rest of the decade. One of the biggest live acts of the time, put on an incredible live show, not just with the, 10 pieces of great musicians, but all the bells and whistles you can imagine, the pyrotechnics, the African influenced stage attire, the lasers and smoke and things flying in the air and pyramids and all that. One of the great live attractions. September. Now, this I didn't know until we started researching this show. One of the co-writers of that song, who helped with the lyrics, was a gal named Allie Willis. She's a gay Jewish woman from Detroit. It was her first big hit as a songwriter. She went on to have a lot of success as a song. A lot of people don't know who this person is. It's worth investigating. She's a fascinating character, very colorful character. Left us a couple of years ago. I think she died in 2019 at 72.
What's her name again?
Allie Willis, ALLEE, WILLIS. So she was kind of a struggling. She actually put out a record of her own in 74. It wasn't a big hit or anything, but got some positive notices. But she decided early on performing wasn't going to be her bag. Wanted to be a songwriter. And Bonnie Raitt was the first major act to cover one of her songs. But she's in L.A. at this point. Earth, Wind, and Fire came out of Chicago, but relocated to L.A. pretty early on. And at this point, they'd had big hits. Maurice White had his own studio, his own production company, all this. Allie gets introduced to his brother, Verdine, who was the bass player in Earth, Wind, and Fire. Meets him that way. And then one day, she gets a call from Maurice White, says he wants to meet her, and says, I want you to co-write our next album. And she, her whole... she was big into black music from a young age, living in Detroit. Her family would drop her off in front of Motown Records, Hitsville, USA. She would sit on the lawn and hear the music coming through the walls that they were recording inside. Now, if you don't know about Motown, if you've never been to Detroit, I had the good fortune of visiting and going to the Super Bowl, and the Seahawks lost to the Steelers, but I had some extra time after the game, and I had a car, and I hit some of the tourist sites. Went to the Motown Museum. It was an incredible experience, but it's this tiny little house. It's just like in a residential neighborhood. It's just this little tiny house in a residential neighborhood in Detroit. And in fact, in the early days of the company, Berry Gordy, as they were growing, he would just acquire more and more properties. So different aspects of the company would be located in different houses. But anyway, so she was steeped in black music, and that's kind of her songwriting métier. And so she was just thrilled to get this assignment from Maurice White. And Maurice already had a lot of the lyrical elements of the song, it kind of in bits and pieces. So she kind of helped him flesh it out, structure it. One of the funniest things about it, though, one of the hooks in that, so I guess the biggest hook in September would be in the chorus, the body so body.
So that song. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's a nonsense syllables. Body certain you remember. Body dancing in September. She hated it and just pleaded with Maurice White. can we please change that to words? Let me come up with some words for that part of the song. And he was insistent that it was to stay what it was. And she got a pretty good lesson in songwriting from Maurice White. I got to find this here because I thought this was just so profound. The essential message was never let a lyric get in the way of the groove. So, and Cheryl and I have talked about this previously. Now, I'm a lyrics guy because I like to sing along to stuff. But if a song is strong enough, if it's good enough, got a great enough feel, the lyrics just don't matter really that much.
They're secondary.
They're very much secondary.
That's the truth.
Another funny thing, talking about lyrics, this song's so great. I've probably listened to this song as much as any song in my lifetime because I loved it from the moment it came out. And it's one of those songs that just doesn't get tiresome. You can listen to it over and over, and it never gets old. But I realized all this time, all these years, and listening to that song so many times, I barely even know the lyrics. I think I'd sung along nonsense lyrics to Laws. Yeah. I didn't even know. So the song starts out, "Do you remember?" And then the very next line, I didn't even realize, "The 21st night of September." I was probably singing something like, "When it was like September." I don't know. I never knew that line. And it's one of my favorite songs. But again, that's an example of how a great song transcends whatever words you put on top of it.
Well, and they even said that was kind of nonsense. Like, there's been speculation. What is the 21st of September? Like, what's this magical date that? And there's conflicting reports. I think one of them was that it was like the due date of one of the one of the musicians. I forget which one.
Maurice White.
There's also Maurice White. Okay, and then there's also people that just say it just sounded good. So it really has no meaning. It's just the way it sounded.
So here's the line specifically. Ali Willis says, Maurice said something that forever changed my outlook on songwriting. I condense what he said to me as never let the lyrics get in the way of the groove. If the melody, beat, and spirit are there, then everyone will know emotionally. They will know what you're saying. I just think that's really profound. September, I had that song on a 45 when I was a kid. And I've just loved it ever since it came out. Now, Roy, growing up in New Orleans, obviously music capital of the universe, but a lot of black music, like you mentioned. I mean, how big into like R&B and funk and then disco, would you say, were you contemporarily there in the 70s? Was that stuff?
Well,
I mean, you're a rock guy.
Well, I'm a rock guy because I learned what the beat is. But as far as literary achievements, I thought Ernie Cado won the top prize for sitting in a la-la waiting for my ya-ya.
Buckwheat Zydeco did a cover of that I love. I think it's a party classic, that song. Yeah.
I do Hendrix versions of that. And when I go sitting in a la-la waiting for so it's a lot of fun. And while we're at it, lyrics for songs are something I've never paid much attention to. So consequently, all these years now, I'm the guy that sings lead. I don't know the damn words. I'll just sit there and go, and people claim to have seen God listening to the lyrics in this tune.
But they put their own interpretation into it. They interpret,
Why do I want to break that happiness? I don't.
Before we get to Cheryl's musical choice, I got to put Roy on the spot here, too. Now, you've seen the songs that we've chosen already on our playlist for 72 to 77. So as a rock and roll player, jazz fusion guy in the 70s, disco is now dominating the pop charts at this time, 77, 78. What would have been your attitude then about disco in general? And what's your attitude about that music now?
Well, first off, disco inspired by cocaine salesmen. If you ever went to a disco gig and then you later on went to a rave gig, it was the same damn thing. They were high as they were dancing to basically boom, 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 boom. So
it was more like boom, 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 boom. It wasn't even that. That had too much of a group.
Right, it had too much. And what I would say to people, I was signed to Casablanca Records when the only big act they had was Donna Summer. But she wasn't exactly doing stupid disco. So the disco thing, as far as I'm concerned, it was a losing battle from the word go.
Well, let's go to Cheryl for her music pick of 1978. It's not disco, but it was a big chart record for Paul McCartney and Wings.
I guess I must have a love-hate relationship with Wings because this is the third song that I have brought to the playlist.
That's all right. They were dominating the charts during this whole time period.
And I feel like I need to explain this to Roy too. We're picking more than one song each for the playlist. So some of my songs are coming from remembering them in the time, in the day, in 1978, which I was 9 years old.
Yeah, we weren't down with Holdsworth and Bruford back
exactly.
Back at the age of 9, unfortunately.
So there's some of the songs are coming from there, from the 9-year-old Cheryl. Some of the songs are coming from appreciating them later, as an adult. So this song is definitely coming from the 9-year-old myself, because I really remember hearing this song on the radio a lot. But then later, I was actually not really a Beatle fan at this time yet either. I didn't really start getting into the Beatles until I was it was close. I was probably like 10 or 11. And then I became a huge Beatle. Like, that's all I listened to for about 5 years. I was just completely 100% immersed in the Beatles in the 80s, when they actually weren't very popular. Like, that was one of the few eras where the Beatles' popularity really waned. And it was also a time too when I was really into the Beatles, where the solo, John Lennon had already been, killed at that point. But Paul McCartney, particularly, his solo career had definitely just kind of, was like gradually becoming less interesting. And so with a little luck, it was on the album London Town. And when I say I have a love-hate relationship with Wings, I'm mostly talking about their albums, because Wings as a singles band are amazing. And they are definitely one of those bands where if you just get a collection, like that Wingspan collection, you pretty much have every song you really need from the band. There are albums that are worthy to have as a full album. I believe McCartney, his first solo album, that's not Wings though. That's right. We're talking about Wings right now. And we definitely have to differentiate between Paul McCartney as an artist and Wings. And he wanted it that way too. He wanted people to know that Wings is a band. And it was the most apparent on the album before London Town, which I've already talked and ranted about a lot.
Wings at the Speed of Sound.
Wings at the Speed of Sound, where he actually allowed every member of the band to have their own song on the album, sing lead on the album. Now we're talking about Paul McCartney, who's one of the best vocalists of all of rock and roll, really. He's a great vocalist, and he's letting these basically unknowns, including Linda, his wife, sing lead.
And you thought Yoko was bad, Roy. Oh my.
Yes.
Dude, I'll take Linda any day over Yoko.
Okay, well, let me tell you though, Linda's fine when she's buried in the background somewhere, but when you bring her forward and let her sing lead vocals on a song like she did on Wings at the Speed of Sound, you're like really questioning Paul's sanity. Like, why?
And they cut their own record with her at this time too, isn't that right? The Susie and the Red Stripes.
Yeah, Seaside Woman, which was a single for her, and or for them, they called the band Susie and the Red Stripes, which actually I don't mind. It's got like a reggae sort of feel to it, and the vocals are sort of sung in a way that are kind of like I don't know. There's something about the sound of it that it's not as annoying to me. It actually kind of works. So after Wings of the Speed of Sound, they went back into the studio, and the first song they recorded after that album was Mull Kintyre, which was released just as a standalone single, and actually became like the best selling UK single of all time, which still kind of always baffles me. And I have to say, I really haven't had an appreciation for that song until more recent years. And there's a video that they shot for that song with them kind of just walking along the Mole of Kintyre in
Right.
Scotland.
Yeah.
So it's on their property in Scotland. So to Paul, it's like a love song for this land that he has been living on and is like, a part of him, really. And in the video, they're walking along, he and Linda and Denny Lane, and they're actually just performing the song as they walk along the Mole of Kintyre. And the song was actually recorded there outside. And then there's kind of like a chorus of people sort of following them around, which to me seem like the townsfolk, like that are part of the little village that they live in. And there's something very quaint about it. It's got the bagpipes. So anyway, that's the song they recorded after Wings of the Speed of Sound. That song became like the biggest selling single of all time before it was knocked off by, I think, the Band-Aid, Do You Know It's Christmas?
And that's in the UK. American radio wanted nothing to do with it.
This is one of those anomalies where it's huge in the UK and means nothing in the US. Like it's just didn't have any impact at all.
They actually, the B-side was the A-side in America. Wasn't that
Girl School?
Girl School, yeah.
Yeah, which was a song that they actually recorded that later was on London Town. So they released the single, and then Linda found out she was pregnant. So their intention was that they were going to finish an album, go back out on tour, and then that was thwarted because, now they have another baby along the way. And so they did end up recording, I think, like 5 or 6 of the songs for the album. Well, actually, they may have ended up recording most of the songs with Joe English on drums and Jimmy McCulloch on guitar. But once it became apparent that they weren't going to go on tour or anything, those 2 guys left. And now we're back to the core again of just Paul, Linda, and Denny Lane, which that was Wings for Band on the Run. So they've now been scaled back again to this trio, basically. And with a little luck, and I don't know if this is why this song is more just keyboards. It's basically just keys and drums. Paul plays the keyboards and bass, and Linda and Denny kind of add, some flourishes there. But actually, that's one of the things I really like about the song. And it definitely is a sound of the times. And once again, we are kind of going back to lyrics too. Paul McCartney is certainly one of those artists that I have to overlook the lyrics in nearly everything he does. Because they're always very simple, somewhat trite. They don't really have much substance behind them. And this is definitely one of those songs that falls into that category. I didn't actually get the album or listen to London Town until much later. I think it's an okay album. I will say that this album, London Town, actually does work better as a whole, as an album, than a lot of his other albums do. And it really didn't have, the only other single from this album that's on the Wingspan collection, let's say, is Girlfriend, which he actually wrote with Michael Jackson in mind. He recorded it himself, but then Michael Jackson recorded it too on Off the Wall. Yeah. And it was a single. It was a hit for him, for Michael. I don't really think it did that well for Paul. I prefer Paul's version of that song. But this album is actually one of the few where he really didn't have that many hit singles, except for With a Little Luck, which was #1 in the US. What's your memories about this song, Matt?
Well, I loved it at the time. I had the 45, just like I did with September, and I still do. I agree with you. The lyrics are certainly nothing special, but the vocal performance is transcendent. I mean, it's Paul really one of his better vocal performances on a single, I would say. It's particularly toward the end of the song when he really starts getting heated up, getting into that soulful, gruff tone.
And the vocals are usually what do lift Paul's songs, up to another level. It's usually the vocal performance.
And, until we started doing the podcast, I never really noticed so much the use of keyboards and synths in a lot of Paul McCartney and Wings music in the 70s. And this is basically all synths and keyboards in the backing track, layered keyboards. But, I mean, he'd been using Moog synth, and we noted it, in our first Wings bit, like Jet. I mean, there's that Moog bass in the back. I mean, he adopted that technology pretty early on.
And it's funny because with this song particularly, I didn't really think about it either, that it's all pretty much all synths. And I mean, for some reason that didn't really I wasn't really thinking of it in that way either. But, Back to the Egg came out after this album. And then he did McCartney 2, which is him just noodling around with synthesizers. Like, that's what the entire album is. And yeah, he was definitely interested and spent a lot of time just kind of messing around with synthesizers. And they do play a prominent role in a lot of his songs. And it's not always as noticeable. This song particularly, it is almost, completely just synths.
And Roy, you're a guitar guy, you're a Strat shredder, but you've been messing around with synth keyboards for a long time, haven't you?
Oh yeah, I have to. I mean, I've sold about 2,000 things on the open market, and they've all made money with Ha-Ha's ringtones. So all of those things, I have to do classical music. When I do classical, it's keyboard, because I want the strings, I want the whole orchestra, So I had to learn, but I wouldn't. My friend Curtis Bringle, he plays with. He just come off the road with Christopher Cross, so he's at a pretty high level. And when I think of keyboards, I think of him, man. He can just sit down and start playing stuff, but I can't take any credit. I have to deliberate for hours to get notes out, but I get them out. But the keyboard in the studio is like, forget the guitar. I work more with the keyboards in the studio than I do with the guitar, because I think of a part and I can't play it, and I have to. It's frustrating as hell.
Well, before we wrap up our first episode of 1978, as we mentioned, if you come on our show, you got to pick a song, you got to pick an album too. And I know, Roy, you had trouble pinning down a favorite album from that year, but we would be remiss if we did not talk about this record before we get out of the year 1978. And I don't know, at this point, Cheryl and I don't have a song or this album as our pick, but it is a cultural landmark, certainly, in rock and roll. And that was the first Van Halen album, which came out in February of that year. Now, it's already, at this point, you're already an accomplished guitar player. What did you and your peers think when you first heard Eruption on the first Van Halen album?
We first heard that one, and that's bullshit. Nobody can play like that. That's what we were saying. That's bullshit. This guy's an asshole. And so then it became evident that he was for real. And I think he's right up there with Holdsworth and all the rest of them in a more rock sense. Once you study Eddie Van Halen, it's a simple outcome. He's playing, arpeggios that he made up, but he got them from his classical dad and all that stuff. Alan Holdsworth, I dare you to figure out one of his solos in one sitting. And if you can, I don't want to talk to you, man, because you ain't my league. You above. And I'm not interested in talking to you. I won't know a damn thing you're saying. So with Eddie Van Halen, he made that hot. However, one thing that disappointed me about, like Eric Clapton, the same thing, he played Albert King's solo note for note from Crosscut Saw on one of his goofy original compositions. I lost respect for him. I never lost respect for Eddie Van Halen because he was crediting, but he did not credit Lenny Breau. He started the real tap moment. He popularized it. People had been doing it for years, but Lenny Breau popularized. He could play beautiful things.
I think Eddie Van Halen did credit Harvey Mandel, I think, as an influence in the tapping too, from Canned Heat.
Well, okay, but Lenny Breau's Lenny Breau's the man. But anyway, who cares about all that? Because later on, as he started veering away from the, hey, watch what I can do, to a song thing, I thought the rhythms, when him and that drummer and bass player, when they play heavy rhythms, dude, that's sheer heaven. That's like tractors coming down the road. Back off. Here we come. So yeah, it was cool. And I liked an inordinate number of tracks from that album.
That album is almost like a greatest hits. Like you look at it and you're like, oh, I know every one of these songs.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Cars' first album. It's like you look at it and you think, oh, wait, is this their greatest? Oh, no, yeah.
It's kind of, I'd say a little controversial. If we don't have any Van Halen in our 78 playlist, we may not. But I don't think I became aware. I was blissfully unaware of Van Halen at age 9 or whatever I was in 1978. But I certainly do remember the hit off their second record, Van Halen 2, and that's probably going to make my playlist for 79, although there's so many great songs from that year. I don't know.
Which is what?
Dance the Night Away. I
Dance
love
the
that
Night
song.
Away.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Pretty
good
cool
one.
song.
That's one of their more, I mean, that's actually
That's a pop song. Yeah.
a pop song. Yeah, one of their more pop songs, but it is a good one.
And if you've seen from our playlist, it is a pop playlist for sure.
Well, and I was gonna say, I have to say, like, AM radio really drives a lot of our playlist so far because that's what I was listening to when I was that age.
Cheryl and I still have a very soft spot for all that 70s AM pop stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they resonate with me because it's more like a nostalgia memory. And then we go back and look at these songs sometimes and we start to dissect them. And it's interesting because I found sometimes going with this playlist, I go back and listen to songs now with a different light, trying to kind of take away the preconceived ideas I have about, like, let's say a disco song where it's like, oh, I've heard that a million times. And do I really want to hear that again? And kind of picking it apart and like really listening to the song. And it's actually, I've gained a new appreciation for a lot of these songs and genres like that by doing it that way and kind of listening to it with new, fresh ears and not just, oh, I've just heard this a million times.
And I'll say something else about what you said, Cheryl, about full body experience with music. I think the songs that we're putting on our playlist move muscles. They're either moving these muscles and putting a smile on your face. They're moving the muscles of your vocal cords because you want to sing along to it, or they're moving your ass and your leg muscles because you want to get out on that dance floor.
Yeah.
It'll be with you until the day you're not here.
Yeah.
And that's cool. As long as you present it with humility and you don't talk down to people, they'll groove with you.
Well, Roy Cunningham, you have stood the test of time. We appreciate you joining us on the playlist here. And before we let you go, let folks know how they can tune into your radio show to hear the good, hard stuff.
Well, right now, it's with Wimberley Valley Radio. That's KWVH 94.3 FM, Wimberley Valley Radio. And you can log in at www.kwvh.org. And right now, my time slot was moved from live on Friday. It now airs from 10 p.m. till 1 a.m. on Friday night. But with Steam Magazine, if you look it up on Facebook, you'll see it.
So our songs to the playlist this week, Roy's Choice, Roxanne by the Police. Mine was September by Earth, Wind, and Fire. And Cheryl goes with A Little Luck by Paul McCartney and Wings. We got 9 more songs. And, of course, Cheryl and I's favorite albums of the year for 1978 to come. But until then, you've been listening to Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Cheryl.
Thanks to Roy for joining us. We'll talk to you next time, everybody.
Bye, everybody.